So my new album comes out in a week and a bit. So I wanted to make a video. I've been posting the backstory to the album on Instagram, but I wanted to make a YouTube video as well. Basically I wrote I wrote most of the album first with the idea hardly there, and then I kind of sculpted this short story that I've written, which is like 5,000 words, around the album. So the album wasn't written based on the short story. The short story is kind of intertwined with the album. It's very loose, and yeah. But also none of the characters in this are like real life people. And I've tried my best to do research and stuff, but I will be honest, I've been quite like quick with this side of it, like the writing side. So there's definitely the possibility that I've written about something and it doesn't really reflect reality to it's very like hearsay, I guess. So the story is again set in a fictional Brisbane. It is not based on anyone. But yeah, basically I'm just gonna read it. I don't know how long 5,000 words takes to read out loud. Maybe 10 minutes or something. I don't know. So Anna saw sophomore for the first time in August of 2023. While they were both waiting for the elevator up from the first floor to the 7th, she took note of his bony arms and thin lips, while he had noticed her a few hours earlier from across the cafeteria. She had an endearing presence, radiating a kind of unwelcoming warmth from her that made no sense to sophomore. While waiting for the elevator, with them was a nurse and another patient. The four of them stood in silence until the undeafening bleep of the elevator sounded. Also, I have not used any AI for this, but I am aware that some of these kind of read like unhuman, like undeafening. I don't know, I think I did study creative writing for a little bit at university. I almost graduated, so I feel like with my knowledge from that, some of this writing doesn't read that well. It's a bit like it's kind of overcompensating, so that's another disclaimer as well. But yeah, a few days later, sophomore was meeting his brother outside to pick up a citrus zin tin. Sophomore's brother was his sole visitor during his hospital visit. He was a few years older and worked as an undergrad entertainment lawyer. Sophomore liked to imagine his brother to be an Australian Harvey Specter, but his extent of what his brother actually did at work ended there. Being August, it was about 17 degrees, so the two of them liked to spend their visits together outside of the hospital. Neither of them smoked. However, over the past month, the two of them had shared the odd Marlboro here or there, and recently Sophomore's brother had been bulk buying zins for the two of them. Sophomore was sliding his uncut thumbnail around the perimeter of the zin seal when Anna had approached the two of them. "Is it Sam?" "Sophomore," he replied. "Can I sit with you?" The three of them sat in the squintingly meandering sunlight. The conversation between the two consisting mostly of sophomore fence-sitting between the two, trying to entertain both his brother and Anna. His brother eventually had to leave to go to work, and Anna and sophomore sat in silence for a 30-second moment, which had felt much longer for both of them. Finally, Anna prompted, "Do you know the nurse from level 7? Ilya, I think his name is. He's so funny. He kinda looks like the Pope Francis to me." Sophomore exhaled a faint grunt. Anna swung her head abruptly around. "Cunt, what the fuck was that?" she said. Sophomore smiled. "My bad." Anna looked up towards the sun, subtly covering her grid. Over the following weeks, Anna had met Sophomore every other day, where they discussed things like work and pop culture and books. They had read basically none of the same books, with the exception of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Alternatively, they did share many of the same beloved films, such as Ice Age and Spring Breakers. They would talk in length about Taylor Swift, basically everything but her music. Polite debates about her consequential political influence, Gala, Travis Kelce, the 1975 Kanye West, etc. They would discuss their favorite albums and their first experience listening to said projects. And even when the conversation topic would become exhausted, the two of them would each take one AirPod and listen to podcasts and watch YouTube. One night, the two of them planned to meet up in the library to watch the movie that was playing, Miss Congeniality. Neither of them had seen it, and neither of them liked it, at least not in the conventional sense. For the record, I've also not seen Miss Congeniality, so me saying they didn't like it is just a guess. I haven't seen it, I can't speak on it. So if you love that movie, if your favorite movie is that movie, I'm sorry. I apologize. It was more of an instant nostalgia bias for the two of them, who had not stopped talking the entire film. After a few more weeks of light-hearted conversations, Anna told Sophomore her reason for being in hospital. She had been diagnosed 7 months ago with stage 3 throat cancer. This was the first explicit disclosure to Sophomore of her diagnosis, although Sophomore had presumed something as such due to her voice quality and the bandage around her neck. Anna, on the other hand, had no estimations on Sophomore's diagnosis. One day, she had suspected that he too had some form of cancer, although when he had gone for surgery, she ruled this out as it had left him in a wheelchair for multiple days. I did a little bit of research about that. Mostly, I couldn't find good answers on whether or not. I kept ending up on Reddit, and I didn't want to be doing Reddit research, but I couldn't find whether or not. I should have spoken to my sister, but cancer treatment related things, whether they would put you in a wheelchair. I assume there would be a fair few cases where they would put you in a wheelchair, but I decided to just kind of go with that. So that's a disclaimer that yeah. She did not really think about or wonder what Sophomore's reason for being there was. From the outside, Anna had always thought that if she had ever been in a hospital, she would be chronically curious about other people's illnesses, kind of how prison mates discuss their convictions in movies. But the opposite was true for Anna. Over the previous 5 months of her hospital stay, she had hardly even considered that there were other people around her. It had felt less like a society and more like a computer game. Everyone had their own objectives, each being entirely solitary to the individual. The only other people in Anna's life were the doctors, the nurses, and the bi-weekly visit from her mom and dad. That is, I think, I don't know how true that is for a lot of people, but for me that's true. I relate to that a lot. So, yeah. She was not a particularly shy person, neither outspoken nor confrontational. In high school, she had been one of the most charismatic students in the grade, and was constantly being invited to parties, after-school hangouts, and study groups, in which she would mostly attend regardless of who was the invitee. It wasn't until her brother's initial arrest that she would start to frequently turn down invitations. She would focus on her schoolwork, eat dinner with her family, sleep 9 hours, and repeat. Nevertheless, her character when at school remained unwavered. No one would have known she had a trouble in the world, or had trouble. Anna was confirmed to be in remission on the 7th of September, and was, yeah, that's right. Anna was confirmed to be in remission on the 7th of September, and was discharged the following week. Sophomore made a full recovery from his surgery, and was also discharged on around the 25th of September. The two of them exchanged a few messages here and there, but were preoccupied with their own side of life to make any IRL plans. Since her discharge, Anna had been spending more time with some of her colleagues. She worked as an environmental engineer, and her team were her best friends. They made her reheatable dinners after her time in hospital, watched movies with her, and sometimes they all came around to her house to play board games. It was one week when something big came up at their work that they were forced to reschedule plans with Anna. With her now open night, she had decided to meet up with Sophomore for GYG and to walk around Indro on a Thursday night shopping. Seemingly, the two of them had been too engrossed in their own affairs to notice the lack of communication between them, but they swiftly rekindled their hysterics and cheek-cramping grins before their order was called. That sounds AI as fuck. At 9 p.m., they were forced to leave, and they went back to the... I got this new bracelet a couple of days ago too. It matches my necklace. And they were called... Oh, I've lost where I was. But they swiftly... At 9 p.m., they were forced to leave, and they went back to the car. In the car, they listened to Trevor Noah's podcast while eating snacks from the Genki Mart. In my head, the episode that they listened to was the Hassan episode, because I listened to that as well, and I think that's where I got the idea, and I liked that episode. Jake was serving a 5-year prison sentence. He was in Waco, where he struggled to make any friends or allies, not only due to his conviction, but historically he had had an antisocial personality. There was a brief period about 6 months prior where he had a friend-like character who shared a similar conviction, although with a lesser sentence. The two of them would sit at the cafeteria together, but would hardly exchange more than a few words a day. Apart from a visit here or there from Anna and Mum, Jake didn't interact with anyone else in the prison. It was about 7 months into his prison sentence when a group of inmates had grabbed him from the shower. 2 of them held his arms while another held his legs open. The 4th inmate took his... This is a trigger warning for, I guess, sexual assault and just violence in general. Held his legs open. The 4th inmate took his left shoe off and pulled out a wooden stump that would resemble a shiv, if you were being generous. He shoved the piece of wood into Jake's soaked, coated scrotum. It recoiled off the side and slid across Jake's left thigh, splintering off a long shard. The inmate then grabbed the long shard and repeatedly stabbed the scrotum until it was nothing but gone. Jake spent 4 weeks in the infirmary until he was transferred into a prison up towards Townsville. That was mostly for white-collar crimes. His mum would visit at most once a month, sometimes with Anna and sometimes with their dad. This continued right up until Anna got diagnosed, cutting down their visits drastically. On the way out of Indro, Anna asked Sophomore if he wanted to go home. She was the one driving. She had sold her car to help pay for her parents' rent, and they now worked less hours after her diagnosis. She drove her dad's truck around whenever he wasn't using it. Or we can listen to the new Lana Del Rey album, On the Top of the Reserve. I believe I'm referencing the picture, the like black and white picture, and then there's yellow on it. That album cover. I still need to listen to it myself, but yeah, that's what I'm referencing. I think. I'm so down. Is what Sophomore said. They parked the car at the bottom of the hill and started to walk. It was about a 40-minute stroll up to the top of the reserve, which overlooked Paddington and the city. Anna liked to look past the buildings and focus on the glistening clumps of lights out at Ipswich. She could vividly remember driving through that part of the town at night as a kid. Jake had told her that they were driving through LA. She loved to imagine that she was in Hollywood, looking out at a megacity. Just as they reached the crest, Sophomore halted and started tapping his pockets frantically. Fuck. What is it, bro? Sorry, nah, I just left my vape in the car. The two of them sat down on the grassy knoll, dew-soaked grass. Anna took off her fake pink vape hoodie for the two of them to sit on. That is oddly specific. I think that's a lyric, actually. That's where I got that from. Sophomore pulled out a small bag and started crushing up a brown circular pill into a fine powder. I was so tempted to write a jagged little pill, but whatever. He then snorted it. You know, if you wrap the rock in tissue paper and then swallow it whole, it will hit instantly, said Anna. The two of them sat on the hill for hours more, listening to a mix of Lana Del Rey, Space Ghost Perp, and Joanne Robertson. God forbid the underground rap meme pages read this, hear this. Said Anna. The two of them sat on the grass hill hours more, listening to him. The sun eventually rose, and the two of them fell asleep as the sun came up. They went out for the next 4 months. It wasn't until their 10th official day that they slept together. They were both seemingly in a similar mind frame about intimacy, perhaps considering the circumstances in which they found each other. They were both happy to take things slow. It wasn't until one Thursday morning that they had met up to go to the library. Sophomore had caught the bus into South Bank, and Anna had parked underneath Goma. At the time, Sophomore was taking medication and had forgotten to take his morning dose. The two of them had departed the library shortly after meeting to go back to Sophomore's unit. His brother was out, and Sophomore made his way to the kitchen to find his tablets. Anna stood around awkwardly, unsure of where to sit. She pottered around for a moment, looking at some old family photos lying around the unit. Sophomore had never mentioned either of his parents, Anna thought to herself. Next, she noticed a purple dildo-shaped object on the bedside table of what she gathered was Sophomore's room, Ice Age poster in brackets. Without thinking, she walked towards it to learn that it was a strap-on. I see you found my bedroom, mate, Sophomore said playfully from the doorway, just before halting, noticing what Anna was looking at. So you like pegging? Anna asked in what seemed to Sophomore an unnaturally casual tone. The reality of the situation was much more complicated. The situation was fucked. He explained the reason for his hospital visit was because his penis had been cut off in an accident. He wasn't entirely embarrassed, more so indifferent to the entire ordeal, it seemed. It had seemed to Anna, so when they slept together later that day, it was more comparable to lesbian sex than the stock standard straight guy, straight girl sex. That is a word salad. They had sex quite frequently after the first time. Not an obsessive amount, but perhaps more than you would expect from a penis amputee and someone just off of chemo. One night, the two of them decided that they would go on a road trip in the final months before Anna was due to go back to work. Melbourne, 18-hour drive. It was February. They had met in August, year prior. On the drive down, they fantasized about living in Melbourne. Perhaps they could afford it, although with their health it probably wouldn't work well. plus Jake, etc. They didn't stay at any motels on the drive down. Anna had her dad's car after helping her parents buy a new car in December. They just drove and laughed until they got tired. The air was so warm that they could sleep with all the windows open, no blankets. They just slept sitting up in the back seats, just off the side of the road. The old four-wheel drive would bump over the potholes as they would pull up to their makeshift campsite each night. It was on this drive that Anna had come to realize that she was the happiest she had been since Jake's conviction, and perhaps ever. It dawned on her that very faintly, sophomore had more or less saved her life. Sophomore had come to a similar epiphany, or realization, I feel like is a better word, back in hospital, when his lust for life began creeping back in. One early morning, the two of them had awoken abruptly when a road train had driven past. That morning, they had sex in the car while the sun came up. It was only 4:30 a.m., and it was already 27 degrees. They would arrive in Melbourne later that day, where they stayed in a private room in a hostel, just outside of the city centre. There was a Lions AFL game on the night they arrived, and they got fucked up on Great Northern, and later a 67 bottle of wine by the river, with 4 R's put in brackets. So tell me, sophomore. The words stumbled out of Anna's mouth with the same ease that an AI artist has trying to explain their creative process. What the fuck? Tell me how the fuck someone's dick gets chopped off. Like, sophomore pulled his phone out and turned on his flashlight, already smirking at the shock he was about to witness on Anna's face. I can show you if you really want. He was also fucked. Anna sobered up for a brief moment, locking eyes with her boyfriend, before fading back into a drunken gaze. Okay, she replied. Sophomore unbuttoned and unzipped his fly. Before pulling his jeans down to his knees, not many people were nearby, he figured, so his poisoned frontal lobe decided this was acceptable to do. And let's be real, it's not like anyone was gonna see his dick. He showed Anna the scar where his shit used to be. She had seen it many times, but then he also pointed out a longer, finer scar down under his thigh, which was new to Anna. This is where the knife slipped, he explained. Anna crunched her eyebrows. She looked at sophomore in confusion. I don't understand. I already know that this, and then he interrupts. This scar is the accident I have referred to. This, he gestured to where his penis would be, was on purpose. Anna laughed briefly and then stopped. She tilted her head without breaking eye contact with sophomore. He continued. I was originally just going to remove my balls, but I decided this was better. And that's an obvious trigger warning, a belated trigger warning for self-harm. My bad, I forgot to say that. Okay, and then this next part will do trigger warnings for self-harm, suicide probably, graphic violence a little bit, abuse, sexual abuse, and other worse things, or maybe not, just the umbrella of sexual assault, and it covers a fair bit of it. It had all started on sophomore's 17th birthday. He had had a high school party the night prior, where he had a few drinks and DoorDashed $100 of Macca's to the party. The next day, after sleeping at his mate's house, His brother had picked him up. He had a vanilla day, watching YouTube and sleeping. It was that night when he saw a message from his dad on his phone. A flood of images filled Sophmore's mind. He imagined his father's victims. He remembered the sorry family sitting across the courtroom, their muted hysterics and sobs, while the judge acquitted Sophmore's dad. His dad's unthoughtful eyes. Sophmore remembered his father's scent. Guilt. It had been years since Sophmore had visited these memories. He hadn't seen his therapist for 18 months. He felt his penis tingle, while a flush of heat rushed through his joints to his ears. This tingle was all he thought about for the following weeks. He stopped going to school and started removing the blades from his brother's disposables. When his brother learned of this, he immediately took him to the GP, and the GP instantly diagnosed Sophmore with general anxiety disorder and put him on meds. Over the following months, Sophmore reclused further and began seeking out reassurance online. Early signs of being a ... A month turned into 6, and the flush of heat running through his body only grew hotter. That was when his delirium at last reached a fork in the road. 2 choices. Go to Bunnings and buy a strong rope, or alternatively, go to Spotlight and buy the sharpest knife. According to Google, amputating any of your own body parts has a high risk of death anyway, so Sophmore decided to go with the latter. Leave the rest up to God. Live or die, one thing would be certain. The family cycle would not be continued. After Sophmore had realized that he had in fact survived his amputation and it was all a success, the doctors stressed that he be examined by a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and also be assigned a social worker for his time at the hospital. Eventually the psychiatrist, I don't know how, because it's not in a mental hospital or a psychiatric hospital. He's in a physical, like a general hospital. So I don't know what the systems are like for just bringing in social workers and psychiatrists and stuff. So that's a bit of a guess. All of that, I didn't really even think about researching that, but yeah. Social worker. Eventually the psychiatrist advised Sophmore and his doctors that his anxiety diagnosis had been a slight misdirection. A cocktail of new medications were prescribed to him. One of the medications had great results and eventually, over the course of 3 years, returned Sophmore to his old self. The only change was that he now had no penis, no balls, he lived in a hospital and took diazepam regularly to calm his akathisia. It was after this that he finally met Anna that day with his brother. And this isn't written, but that day that he met Anna, that is the day 3 years after, and they met. And that was the day at the start of the story thing. But plot hole, can't explain why he was there for 3 years. I think he was revisiting. I think that's the idea. He was revisiting. Or having another surgery. I don't know why he's still there. Y'all can figure that out. They arrived home from their Melbourne trip. So back to present. They arrived home from their Melbourne trip in April. Anna's throat cancer returned in May. She passed away 3 weeks later. On the last few days of her life, she had told Sophmore about her brother, Jake. Not too much. Just when she was 12, their family had lived in Adelaide, and the two of them, Anna and Jake, were signed to an acting agency where they were extras in advertisements and films. She didn't mention anything more about him. This was the first time that the 5-year age gap between had dawned on Sophmore. While Anna was acting as an extra in a random film in Adelaide, a 7-year-old sophomore was in Meanjin, visiting his dad on the weekends, playing AFL with his brother. After Anna had passed, sophomore applied for med school. Quick step back. Visiting his dad on the weekends, his dad was acquitted, so he wasn't visiting him in jail, he was visiting him because of custody. After Anna had passed, sophomore applied for med school. He also quit his job. He sold drugs, but mostly lent on his brother for income. A few weeks passed, and he began to believe less and less that the feeling of pain was temporary. He started. In July of that year, sophomore walked to Bunnings to buy a ladder. Once he got home, he raided the pill cabinet. He had already used up all of his diazepam that month. Next to it, though, he found a tramadol blister pack, prescribed to his brother the previous year. He then strapped the ladder to his backpack and pocketed the blister pack. It was about an hour's walk to the Story Bridge. As he approached, he swallowed the remaining tramadol tablets. He sat on the edge of Kangaroo Point for what seemed like only a brief moment. Sophomore then began towards the bridge. It was 5 a.m. The sun was just rising, but was silenced among the clouds. He popped the ladder against the cage and climbed up it. His phone buzzed. "You're good? Where did you go?" It was from his brother. He opened iMessage. Below his brother's name, he noticed an unopened message from Anna. It was from the day that she had gone back into hospital. "Hi, I'll call you later. Also, I got some new scissors if you want a haircut." Sophomore put his phone back into his pocket. As he fell from the bridge, he felt the lifelessness evaporate from his skin. As he approached death, he felt exponentially safer. Belonging. He had always heard that suicide attempt survivors felt regret when falling to their death, but sophomore did not. In his final moments, he thought maybe it was because... I fucked that up. He had always heard that suicide attempt survivors felt regret when falling to their death. Sophomore did not. In his final moments, he thought maybe it was because he believed he was going to meet up with Anna again. Heaven. Afterlife. But that wasn't it. The two were now on different paths. Sophomore knew he would never see Anna again. Anna knew she would never see sophomore again. It was a mutual agreement. But the real reason he didn't feel regret was because he had already passed away. If we get the cruel privilege of dying, then everyone faces the consequences but us. We will no longer feel pain, but we will no longer feel loved. That is why when the doctors told me my cancer is chronic, I didn't care. Because if it's true that nothing is truly chronic, then sure, it will kill me, but it will kill me. Anna had told this to sophomore while in Melbourne. The end. And then that's like the back of the storyboard. But yeah, that is the lore. I hope you enjoyed it. Listen to the album when it comes out. It comes out on the 12th of August. And there were lots of kind of like fucked up parts of that story, so if any of that is like scary or anything, talk to people in real life, try not to use